Most people assume poverty is primarily caused by laziness, irresponsibility, or a lack of ambition, but when economists study long-term financial outcomes across populations, the reality becomes far more structural and psychologically complex. Many individuals work extremely hard for decades and still remain financially fragile, not because they never earned income, but because modern economic systems often make wealth accumulation fundamentally different from income generation. This distinction is one of the most important concepts in personal finance, yet it is rarely explained clearly. Income determines how much money flows into a person's life. Wealth determines how long that person can survive, adapt, and maintain control if that flow slows down or disappears. Those are not the same thing. A person earning a respectable salary may still possess very little actual financial resilience if most of their income is continuously redirected toward maintaining rising living costs, recurring obligations, debt structures, transportation, healthcare, rent, insurance, and consumption patterns that quietly expand over time. From the outside, the individual appears financially stable because income exists. Internally, however, the system may already be operating at maximum pressure. This is why many working adults experience a strange contradiction. They work harder, earn more money, and improve their visible lifestyle, yet still feel financially anxious almost all the time. The problem is not always insufficient effort. Often, it is that the surrounding financial equations changed faster than their expectations did. For much of modern history, labor income alone could more realistically support long-term wealth building. Housing costs were lower relative to wages. Education debt was smaller. Certain careers provided pensions and long-term institutional stability. Asset prices had not yet separated as dramatically from average incomes. In that environment, disciplined labor often translated more directly into wealth accumulation over time. Today, the mathematics increasingly look different. In many regions, housing prices rise faster than wages. Inflation continuously pressures everyday expenses upward. Entire industries experience instability during technological shifts. Credit systems encourage immediate consumption while asset ownership increasingly determines long-term financial growth. As a result, many people unknowingly spend their lives inside systems optimized more for continuous economic participation than meaningful wealth accumulation. One of the clearest examples is debt normalization. Debt itself is not always destructive. Certain forms of debt can finance education, businesses, or appreciating assets. The issue is that modern economies increasingly normalize debt as a permanent lifestyle operating system rather than a temporary financial tool. Monthly payments become psychologically invisible because they are everywhere. Cars, phones, subscriptions, furniture, education, and even food purchases can now be divided into manageable recurring payments that feel small individually but collectively reshape long-term financial flexibility. Human psychology adapts quickly to recurring expenses. Once a payment becomes routine, the brain stops evaluating it consciously. Over time, this creates a financial environment where large portions of future income become pre-allocated before a person even receives their paycheck. The result is that many workers are technically earning money while simultaneously possessing very little actual control over it. This is where the difference between working hard and building wealth becomes especially important. Wealth is usually built through ownership, compounding, and time. Labor income alone often grows linearly. Asset ownership can grow exponentially. That difference appears small initially, but over decades it creates enormous separation between groups who primarily exchange time for income and groups who increasingly own systems that generate income independently. Consider two individuals earning similar salaries. One spends nearly all income maintaining lifestyle obligations while the other consistently converts portions of income into appreciating or cash flow producing assets. In the early years, their lives may appear almost identical externally. But as time progresses, one person remains dependent on continuous labor while the other slowly develops financial systems capable of generating income without equivalent increases in effort. The gap compounds quietly. This is one reason wealth inequality often accelerates faster than people intuitively expect. Compounding does not feel dramatic day to day, but mathematically it behaves very differently from ordinary wage growth. Once assets begin producing returns that purchase additional assets, financial momentum changes entirely. Yet most people are not taught to think this way. Modern education systems primarily prepare individuals to participate productively in labor markets, not necessarily to understand ownership structures, capital allocation, tax efficiency, or long-term compounding behavior. As a result, many people spend years optimizing income while barely understanding the systems that historically generated durable wealth. At the same time, modern consumer culture continuously reinforces spending as identity formation. People are encouraged to associate purchases with personal success, emotional reward, social belonging, and self-worth. Advertising systems are extraordinarily effective at transforming consumption into emotional language. A larger home becomes proof of achievement. Expensive products become signals of competence. Convenient spending becomes framed as self-care. None of these purchases are automatically irrational, but over time they can quietly redirect enormous amounts of future wealth-building capacity toward maintaining appearances. This creates another hidden trap. As lifestyles expand, fixed expenses rise. Higher fixed expenses reduce flexibility. Reduced flexibility increases dependence on uninterrupted income. Increased dependence creates anxiety during economic uncertainty. To reduce anxiety, many people pursue even higher income while simultaneously increasing lifestyle costs again. The cycle reinforces itself. This is why some high earners still feel financially trapped despite objectively strong incomes. The issue is not merely how much money enters the system. The issue is how much of that money remains available for ownership, compounding, and optionality after all recurring obligations are satisfied. Historically, financial systems have always rewarded certain behaviors differently during different eras. Industrial economies rewarded labor stability. Rapid expansion periods rewarded risk-taking and ownership. Inflationary periods rewarded asset holders more than cash savers. Digital economies increasingly reward scale, leverage, audience ownership, and intellectual property. People who remain financially stuck are not always making irrational decisions. Often they are operating with financial strategies inherited from older economic conditions while living inside entirely different systems. This also explains why financial stress feels unusually persistent today even among hardworking people. Many individuals subconsciously sense that effort alone no longer guarantees long-term stability in the way previous generations expected. The result is psychological exhaustion. People work continuously while feeling as though they are barely maintaining position rather than advancing. Eventually, this changes how people emotionally relate to money itself. Money stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like survival maintenance. Income becomes associated less with possibility and more with obligation management. Financial goals become reactive rather than expansive. Instead of asking how to build long-term independence, people focus on surviving immediate pressure cycles. But understanding these systems changes perspective. The goal is not to blame individuals for structural realities nor to assume financial outcomes are predetermined. The goal is to recognize that building wealth usually requires more than increasing income alone. It often requires controlling recurring expenses, protecting flexibility, understanding compounding, prioritizing ownership, and surviving long enough for long-term financial systems to begin working in your favor. Because ultimately, many people stay financially stuck not because they never worked hard, but because modern economies often reward ownership, leverage, and compounding differently than effort alone. And once a person understands that distinction clearly, they begin seeing money less as something to constantly earn and more as something to strategically position over time.